Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. Can a classroom ever be truly equal? Before we begin, we're going to explore equality and equity. During my research, I found a definition that fit well in the classroom context. It stated, if equality means giving everyone the same resources, equity means giving each student access to the resources they need to learn and thrive. The needs of our students are wide. While some students thrive in a quiet place or perhaps with lots of structure, others still require freedom to move and speak in order to process. You external processors know what I'm talking about. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. Having the same access does not mean getting the same results. However, raising those boxes to the right height for each student was not where my inquiry began. I was focused on one box, the one the boys were currently standing on. Before I began my journey, I wanted to look into what appeared to be a lack of attention to the needs of boys in schools. In the last 4 years, I've seen advocates for the needs of girls in education, First Nation students, ELL learners, LGBTQ students, and students with special needs. I'd seen firsthand boys struggling with academics and behavior, but nowhere did I hear a voice for these boys. Throughout my time in the education program, I began to notice a focus on girls in education at a time when I was growing more concerned about the boys. As most of you know, I have a natural inclination to question things, especially when my personal experience differs from the information being presented. And having worked as an EA for 10 years, the message didn't sit well with me and led me to wonder how boys were really doing. Don't get me wrong, I don't doubt girls have needs in the school, as do other groups. But what concerned me was the lack of discussion about boys. My own experience as a young boy in school was mixed, as were other men's I know after having conversations with them during this process. In some ways, school came easily to me, but in other ways, it was an enormous challenge. I spent many hours in the hallway as a result of my inability to control my behavior, and looking back, my teacher's inability to address my needs. This was the case in elementary, and in secondary, I was able to control my behavior a little more, but my academic performance suffered. As an adult, I've seen many teachers that were not comfortable allowing boys to express themselves in the ways they like to, a little on the rougher side. Boys were not allowed to draw swords or guns, and rough play is banned. But research shows no link between childhood weapons and adult aggression, and actually points to benefits from rough play at a young age. My touchstone moment comes from a class in high school where an English teacher was giving some of the guys poor marks. They challenged the teacher to a no-name submission on the next essay. The teacher was sure she had no bias and readily agreed. However, the marks proved otherwise. Those same students who complained about getting low marks had marks grow by 10 to 20%, and they were not alone. In research, I discovered boys around the world receive lower grades for the same work in blind experiments. Researchers have noticed that test scores did not meet the grades given in class. It showed that boys with poor classroom behavior had grades impacted the most heavily. However, if you were a good boy, you were more likely to receive the highest mark for the same work. I was surprised to learn that this has been happening for years, and it's not until recently that it began to be addressed. According to one author, learning disabilities and behavior problems are more prevalent among boys, and high school and college graduation rates are lower. Boys also receive 2/3 of failing grades and are more likely to find school boring or frustrating. Yet we are doing very little to address this. With these trends, the next generation of boys will be the first that is less educated than their fathers. Why were people ignoring this? Were they ignoring this, or were they just unaware? It was at this point that I took a break from my question. I found myself on a frustrating path and I didn't like where I was headed. It was at this time that I thought about the question Diana asked us in class. Well, what keeps me up at night? Why was I so upset about this? Sure, it was concerning, but I was feeling something else. And then it hit me one day when I was driving. It was the unfairness of it all. I've been passionate about fairness my whole life, whether it was the classroom, the hockey arena, or a game of Monopoly. Rules were rules and fair was fair. This made me look beyond my own interests and intentions for the boys and look at the broader scope that included everyone's experience in the classroom. This is where I began to look at equity in the classroom. I didn't just want equal treatment. I wanted students to feel their needs were acknowledged. So I changed directions. I started looking at ways I could improve the classroom for everyone. It sounded very noble, but what did that look like? I talked to educators and friends about my change in focus and looked at articles in hoping finding ways to bring equity into the classroom. Not only through curriculum, but also in rules, social experiences, the physical environment, and by getting to know the students as I could find out their specific needs. A few ideas I explored were incorporating First Nation ways of knowing into my lessons and presentations for various classes, viewing culture as a resource. One idea that came to mind was having a holiday calendar where we celebrate all cultures' holidays and take them as moments to appreciate differences and similarities in all of us. I also looked at using different methods of presenting material to meet different learner needs and preferred methods, designing assignments and assessments to be flexible and include student choice, and incorporating flexible learning environments to change the physical makeup of the classroom in order to better meet students' needs. I also looked at using inclusive language to ensure all students felt comfortable, and using multimedia to meet differentiated learning goals. I also liked the activity in class where we were given 2 minutes of uninterrupted speaking time. I'm also working on a few ideas for my practicum, like Genius Hour and a lunch group involving reading, physical activity, and strategy games. Other things I'll work on in the longer term, like building a library full of fiction and non-fiction books of every genre, including dual language books and graphic novels. These are just some of the things I read about, but I still have questions like, whose needs comes first? When 3 students need to talk it out, 3 need silence, 4 need physical activity first before they can do some work, 2 others need extra instruction, whom do I make a priority for? Is there a time when one learner's needs supersede another's? What can we do to help when the problems lay outside of school? Can my classroom truly give an equitable experience to all? Do I have the time to plan, assess, and organize for 30 different needs for each lesson activity every day? These are just some of the questions I have going forward. And as this project was coming to a close, I was feeling a little melancholy and wrote about giving up on the boys in one of my reflections. I had seen very little that related directly to boys in my search for equity in the classroom, but I was not surprised given the start of my journey. It was at this time that I got a reflection back from Diana that said she hoped I continued to pay close attention to the boys, as someone needed to champion their needs. I think it helped me move forward and allow myself to still want to pay special attention to the needs of boys in education. I wanted to be that champion Rita spoke about in her TED Talk. I hope this presentation helped you think a little more about being a champion for them too. This picture with the boxes looks easy enough, but building those boxes is not. The task is complex and requires awareness of the needs of children in the classroom. I was reminded of this during a few of the presentations these last 2 weeks as people discuss the pressure to be perfect, all-doing and all-knowing as a teacher. The sheer amount of needs and options can seem overwhelming at times. But we have some options and can seek support from peers and professors. We can do this. I've gotten to know many of you well, and I believe we can. In this program, we have been shown many tools and learned many of the skills we need to start building towards student success. Some have come from our profs and classes, but many have also come from each other. By using these skills and utilizing differentiated learning when possible, we get closer to having a truly equitable classroom. Thanks for listening and watching, and for being on this journey with me for the last 3 years. Here's one last batch of baby animals.